According to a new survey, majority of Americans want to change the First Amendment. A study found that people want jail time for hate speech as they call for updates to 200-year-old law to reflect cultural norms of today. Well, it was fun while it lasted. I'd like to give this a round of a special thanks to the Founding Fathers who gave us 200 plus years of expanding growth and prosperity, freedom, liberty for all, but now it's officially done. And we can see that 51% of Americans believe the First Amendment, adopted in 1791, should be updated to reflect the cultural norms of today. Well, there you go. It's been fun, guys. Appreciate it. You know, recently a law was proposed in Boston that would affect, I believe, it was proposed in Massachusetts, that would make the B word a criminal offense to use disparagingly. You would be fined and potentially face 6 months in jail time. Well, I'll tell you what, man. If you ever get to that point, I will walk around shouting those words relentlessly. Now listen, there's a big difference between social acceptance, cultural norms, and trying to jail someone. So when it comes to like the pronoun debate, my issue is not with individual respect. I have absolutely no problem and encourage others to respect each other. My problem is with the government trying to force me to do something. Because perhaps you may have noticed, I'm a bit anti-authoritarian and quite contrarian sometimes. So come and tell me to do it and I will say, no, you can't tell me what to do. But now we can see, we're heading down a dangerous path. It's been fun, you know, but listen, you might be thinking we'll never change the First Amendment, it'll never happen. When we get to the point where these young snowflakey type individuals who are terrified of mean words become the overwhelming majority, yeah, you'll see these changes. You want to talk about the amendments of the Constitution? How about this one? Government shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, the press. Pretty sure we got a ton of laws on what you can or can't say. You can't incite people to violence. Now here's the thing. I agree with that. Directing, giving instruction, or inflaming, I understand why we say you can't do that. But in reality, we must accept that is in violation of the First Amendment. Now here's the thing. The courts rule, Supreme Court essentially, it varies. They basically say, well, the spirit of the First Amendment was meant to protect the right to expression, not the right to cause crimes and violate the law or to encourage others to do so, in which case we don't think the Founding Fathers meant this. Now we go to the Second Amendment. Now things start getting interesting. They say the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, define arms, define bear, define infringed, because now things start getting messy. They've already banned a ton of arms, so yes, they've infringed. I'm not an absolutist when it comes to the Constitution because I do believe there is a reasonable approach to trying to interpret what the Founding Fathers meant and what can protect our society. So having a bunch of people run around shrieking and inciting violence is a really, really bad thing for us. And to that regard, yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and say having a bunch of people running around with like rocket launchers probably would be bad for us. And so I can understand why we put limits on it. I will also add as well, just for Beto O'Rourke who doesn't get this, did you know you can legally own a tank? He said something like, you can't legally own a tank, you know, we have laws on it. No, you're wrong, bruv. You can. So anyway, the point I'm making, you want to argue that we will always have free speech. I'll tell you the answer is we're not going to if this trend continues. Because while most of us can agree that don't incite to violence, that makes sense, it's against the law, that's not what the First Amendment meant. They're now saying the same thing. Well, hate speech at a time, you know, the colonizers and the imperialists, and so now they're trying to change it once again. This is not for the betterment of society. I will say, at the very least, I'm glad that it's a roadblock from stopping dictatorships and authoritarians from just imposing their will. If it turns out that the majority of the people demand the change, I think it's a very devastating and dangerous change for our society, and we're getting to that point. Let's read a little bit of the story. And before I move on, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. But the most important thing you can do, share this video. This one in particular. If 51% of Americans believe that the First Amendment should be updated, hate speech should be criminal, we've got serious problems and we need to talk about this. So please consider sharing this to help me grow the channel and continuing the work that I do, but also spreading the idea of why free speech is so important. And I'm going to break down for you why it's so important. Check this out. In it, they talk about how, they go through the basic numbers. They say as far as punishment for hate crimes, some 54% of those Americans surveyed found they would prefer possible jail time, while another 46% shared They would want nothing more than a ticket or a fine. But here's where it gets interesting. When you scroll down to look at what they wanted to restrict, 52% of survey takers wanted racists to be restricted. 50% wanted neo-Nazis restricted. 46% said radical Islam. 35% said Holocaust deniers. 20% of survey takers wanted anti-vaccine advocates restricted, and 18% said climate change deniers. The Campaign for Free Speech determined that most don't actually understand what the First Amendment protects, after some 79% of respondents believed that the First Amendment allows anyone to say their opinion no matter what, and they are protected by law from any consequences of those thoughts or opinions. Here's the thing. You can see that there is no consensus on what should be restricted. And that's why we decided as a government to back away and just allow people to say their opinions. Because I'll tell you what, man, if right now 51% believe we should criminalize hate speech. Okay, what happens when 51% decides that we should criminalize you? Your ideas, the things you like. What happens if look, you know what's really, really funny about all this? Who's in control of the government right now? The Republicans. And they want to get rid of 1A and 2A at a time when Donald Trump is in the White House and is facing re-election by a landslide? How absurd. How woefully and terribly absurd. They're saying, we don't like the evil orange man who's taken over our government, but we should give up our right to speech and our right to bear arms. What? Are you crazy? Now should be the time you're advocating for those rights. Of course, they like to simultaneously claim the First Amendment, woo, protect the press, Trump, how dare you, and at the same time, the First Amendment, oh, we shouldn't have free speech. Okay. They say, according to Bob Lystad, executive director of the Campaign for Free Speech, the findings are frankly extraordinary. Our free speech rights and our free press rights have evolved well over 200 years, and people now seem to be rethinking them, he explained to the Washington Free Beacon. Lystad explained that hate speech was not defined in the survey, allowing respondents to draw their own conclusions by what it meant. I think our findings are fueled in large part because of a rise of hate speech, but traditionally, hate speech is protected in the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has upheld that principle time and time again. Lystad and the group believe hate speech should be denounced, but don't believe censorship should be the solution. Hate speech should be condemned, but legally. The answer to speech we don't like is more speech, not censorship. Our primary focus is education and to help people better understand the First Amendment, free speech, free press, and why it's so vital to our democracy. Now, the First Amendment is not free speech. You may be saying, but Tim, no, listen. The First Amendment is, I believe, 5 rights. The freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to redress of grievances, and what's the 5th one? I had them all in my head, and I'm like, okay, now I got to make sure I recite the 5 perfectly. Someone comment for me, because redress of grievances, free press, free speech, free religion, and now I missed the other one. Freedom of speech? Whatever. I'm not good at doing lists. I'm terrible. I am an imperfect person. But you get the point. The First Amendment protects a variety of rights, not just speech. And too many people right now conflate free speech with the First Amendment, okay? So, while I've made the point that no one can agree on what should be banned and how it should be banned, let me just stress, okay? When people say freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences, they're saying literally nothing. Because everything has consequences. If I stood up right now, there would be a consequence. My video would be strange and likely ruined. Everything you do is a consequence. My words right now, it's all consequence. If I choose to eat chicken or eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, there will be a consequence to that. Okay? How much protein, how many carbs? Everything is a consequence. They put off, you know what really, really bothers me is that XKCD comic you may have seen, where he's like, people, the First Amendment, they're showing you the door. It's like the dude has no idea what he's talking about, and he pulled that one out of thin air, and it makes no sense because the First Amendment is not about free speech. It is about a multitude of rights the government can't take away. They can't infringe upon. But here's the reality, okay? You can say what you want, and here's what they do. Oh, it's so annoying. In these forums, they'll be like, why are the right-wingers arguing for the right to incite violence? It's like, nobody said that. Never. Like some people, fine, I'll give you that, but it's like 10 people who are like, I'm an absolutist and we should be allowed to do this. No, you shouldn't. And most conservatives are simply saying, let people have their opinions, even if their opinions are bad. It's called freedom, but they want to take that away. So it's all just these false arguments. But boy, I'll tell you what, man, Look at the screen. There you go. We're here. We are at the era now where 51% of Americans believe the First Amendment should be updated. Now, but what does that really mean? Let me walk something back to correct myself. What does that really mean? Okay. Updated to reflect our society. That could mean to improve speech. But they do say, as far as punishment, 54% of those Americans surveyed found they would prefer possible jail time. I'll tell you what, man. That we've already seen it, okay? Whether you want to admit it or not, there have been people who have been locked up for rap lyrics in the United States. Yep. It's worse in the UK. But it's happening here. And it'll get worse. It will. Everything we see is flowing in one direction. So what can you expect? Now, I will walk back, I guess, with my main channel video about Kanye West and conservative Christianity and things like that, Trump landslide, maybe people are finally fed up. And maybe there's going to be a big pushback and the pendulum's going to swing back the other direction. I don't know. But I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. Next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Podcast, 6:30 p.m. every single day on all podcast platforms. I'll see you all next time.